Welcome to Lead Different, the podcast that redefines leadership and challenges the status quo. Hosted by Daniel Dominguez, founder and CEO of Why Not Leadership. This show is your compass to becoming a better leader through the power of self-awareness. Good leaders foster teams that are engaged, empowered, and energized. Join us on this transformative journey as we equip you with the tools and insights to lead different. Get ready to challenge the ordinary and embrace self-aware leadership. This is Lead Different.
Subscribe now. Discover a new era of leadership. Lead different, because great leaders change the world.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Lead Different podcast. I am very excited to share with you guys a young friend of mine who I've met through my golf connections at the Albuquerque Country Club. Anya Parasher is a Stanford University student studying public policy and economics. She is passionate about improving the lives of New Mexicans through research and policy. She has experience at Project ECHO, the UNM Center for Social Policy, the City of Albuquerque Mayor's Office, and this past summer she spent time at U.S. Senator Martin Heinrich's office in Washington, D.C. She is focused on housing, economic development, energy, and welfare. She is one of the most brilliant young people I've met in a long time. I've known her father for over 20 years, so I've known her family for a long time. And it's been such a fun journey to watch her develop and grow along with her brother. And the things that this family does are pretty amazing. So I can't wait to introduce you guys to Anya Parasher. Welcome to the Lead Different podcast, Anya. And thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to have a conversation with you today.
It is exciting to have you, Anya. Listen, this is, I mentioned it in the introduction. So I've kind of seen you grow up. I remember starting hearing about you, seeing you playing as a young kid on the golf course, and then becoming a really good golfer, and then hearing about you competing at a high level at the state level, and being a state champion as a freshman, which is pretty darn cool. But there's more to you than golf, right? There's a lot more that you've done, and that's why you're here. Because the more I learned about the things that you're doing, I really wanted to feature a young voice. This podcast is about leadership. It's about leading different, and it's about people expanding their world. And I think you've done that in a really big way recently. So I think Sunil put, as you guys will see on the promos, I think you're one of our youngest voices since that we've had. You are the youngest person we've had on the podcast. So welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. What's exciting for you right now, Anya?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. No, I'm really excited to be here today. Recently I just finished up my first year in college, so that's definitely a big new phase of my life. It's the first time I've been away from Albuquerque, been away from New Mexico. I've lived here my entire life. So definitely being away from home, I think, and just like living by yourself is a big phase. But yeah, I just finished up my first year and then spent the first half of the summer in Washington, D.C., interning for Senator Heinrich from New Mexico. That was really cool because I hadn't been home since December. And so even just being in DC, but still being connected to that New Mexico office, and everyone's from New Mexico, you're working on issues that are related to New Mexicans very directly. You're talking to constituents from home. That really made me feel at home, A, and then B, just like having this sense of purpose that I want to do something in the future that helps people from where I'm from. So that's what I've been up to. And then I just got home a few weeks ago, and I'll be here for the next like 2 or so weeks. By the time this airs, I'll probably be back in school. But yeah, I'm actually helping out at the DA's office a little bit. So that's been really fun, hanging out with friends and yeah.
So how different is it, right? So this is really cool. We're catching you at a great time in your life. And for those of you that are wondering, okay, why is Anya Parasher on the podcast? Why shouldn't she be? She's a great young leader. I predict we're gonna see Anya's name in the future, doing some great things, and we're going to get to talk about some of the things that you're passionate about, Anya. But just even in your short time as a young adult, you've done some great things. You were I mentioned earlier, how I got to know about you. So I've known your dad for a long time, since before you were born, and so we've kept in touch. But then I saw you and Neil. I left town, but when I came back into town, you guys were teenagers, and remember seeing you around the golf course. You're very modest about your golf, but you were a state champion as a freshman in high school. You continued to play and do really well, not only in golf but academically. And then you applied to your dream school and got accepted. So tell us about what it's been like to apply to your dream school and then get in and spend that first year at Stanford.
Yeah, I think, it's crazy how, like, fast all of this has gone. I feel like just yesterday I was in high school, so it's a little bit, it's kind of weird for me to talk about it like it was so long ago. But, yeah, so when I was in high school, I actually started high school around the COVID era. So when I was in ninth grade, like 8th grade, ninth grade, that was COVID. And that's definitely a really weird time to have to transition online. And we could kind of see the effects of that a lot in my school and schools across Albuquerque. Um, and so one of the issues, and this was kind of like my first calling to policy or to nonprofit work or to government, in general. Um, a lot of my friends were struggling with their mental health, and I saw it in my family, I saw it in my school, my classmates, my friends. And being online definitely took a big toll on that. So once we had gone back to school, my own school had seen 2 suicides within the span of 6 months. And I had friends at other schools who had mentioned the same issue. And so that's kind of how I got started at Project Echo and really like found my love for not just policy in general, but like being able to create a program and really run it and have the ability to make change on a certain issue. But yeah, so in high school, I really loved doing that kind of work. I worked at the mayor's office and um, I wasn't really involved in as many like speech and debate club or anything. I really liked doing that work outside of school. And then when I was in school, I also was like I was kind of a nerd, like really loved learning. And so I was like I would say I was a pretty good STEM student in high school. I don't know if I'm a pretty good STEM student now, but like loved doing math and then on top of that, like I had started really getting interested in government. And so took a lot of classes like related to that. And yeah, I just had a lot of fun in high school. I feel like for me, that time, like you kind of make the most out of what you put into it. And so that was like a really, really good transitional time for me. Um, but yeah, that's my senior year, my older brother goes to Stanford, and so I applied there, and I really wanted to go there. That was like my dream school. And I got in, and so I was like, Stanford has a great economics program. They have a really condensed public policy program as well, and I wanted to be close to home. And so I picked Stanford, and I've been loving it so far. So yeah.
Yeah, you said a lot of things there that I want to make sure we dig into. The impact of COVID on your generation. You were 8th grade, ninth grade year. You go through probably a year and a half to 2 years where you're online learning, you're limited social interaction. What are some of the biggest impacts that you saw amongst? You mentioned your family. Just maybe you can talk us through some of the impacts that you saw in your family, and then you talked about your friends and the suicides that happened not only at your own school but even amongst your friend group across the Albuquerque area. So tell me a little bit about that and what you feel was the biggest impact, and then how you dealt with it and how it led to your love for public policy.
Yeah. COVID, I'm glad. I don't know how to say this directly, but I'm glad that I got it towards the end, like when I was in high school. I can't imagine what it would have been like to have to go online during elementary school or middle school when you're really in those fundamental learning years and also social years, right? Um, for me, I think COVID was a really good reset. I feel like in middle school, I had a lot of like, and you're like growing up and still learning how to, interact with other people. But um, I think for me, I really needed that. But for a lot of other people, it was detrimental. And we saw those effects all across New Mexico. Once we had come back from COVID the following year, so this was probably 2022, New Mexico was the worst. We ranked the worst in youth suicide. So it was just, I mean, we could really see the effects concentrated in New Mexico. Um, yeah, I'll say one of my classmates took his own life in September of 2021, and that was a really, really big deal. Um, Not only, having to experience that, but then seeing the ripple effects of that throughout our community and especially in our school. And so within the school, we had been talking, and I was in student government, so and I was really interested, just like personally, in like what can we do, going forward. And we had looked into programs from Yale and Harvard. They're called like social emotional learning programs to invest in for the school. And none of them were tailored well enough for the students. It was a lot of like resources for teachers, which is great, right? And we need that. But there was nothing directly given to the students. And so um, I think a lot of students were reluctant to any programs, having gone through all that and seeing firsthand what happens and the reality. Um, they wanted something that was initiated by students, by fellow students. And so I had this idea of creating this like student wellness advisory board club type of thing at my own school. And we would host these monthly events. We would do like chalk affirmations and yoga sessions and like learning to regulate your emotions, journaling, vision boards, like all these things, right? And then I kind of wanted to implement this at other schools in Albuquerque. So using the ECHO model, we were basically virtually meeting with student leaders all across Albuquerque and having them start their own wellness advisory. So it was I think, this was like my 10th through my 12th grade year, and I've still been in touch with some of the student leaders, and they're still having their clubs at their schools, which is like really impactful for me to see, right? Um, but yeah, it was definitely a big learning experience for me in, how to make change in that way, but also kind of seeing what's going on in your community and what you can do to make a difference, right? So yeah.
It's interesting as I listen to you, Anya. We were talking in the pre-show about we talked about this is a show where I interview leaders, and you were a little shy about talking about leadership because you say, well, I'm not really a leader, but look at what you've done. You created a program and you implemented it across the entire city as a very young person, and that had to have had a positive impact on a lot of people. Probably continued to have a positive impact, and you didn't just keep it to within your own community. You expanded it to to other high schools, and you grew it. Probably led to a lot of the networking opportunities. You also worked in the mayor's office during high school, so you've had your hand in some public policy at a very young age, and seeing the impact. What's something that this is very interesting to me when I look at your generation. What's something that perhaps people in my generation or older generations don't really know about how your generation was impacted by COVID? You mentioned
Yeah.
suicide. What are some of the other effects that you continue to see in your peer group?
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about this for a long time. Um, I think one of the biggest struggles right now that we see is that youth issues in general just are not prioritized because obviously we don't have as much youth representation in government, right? Younger people obviously like can't run for office, and so I think a lot of lawmakers have to go out of their way to really prioritize youth issues. And I think one of the biggest, the other things, this misconception that like my generation maybe doesn't work as hard or isn't as dedicated to like finishing their education and finding jobs. I just think that we can't really compare generations like that. Like, we can't really look across time periods where things have changed so much and compare everything in the same way. For example, a lot of people point to technology and say, like, "This is a big deal. This is one of the reasons why our generation is so different." And I would agree. I think, like, we don't know what the effects of being on social media and having screen times of, like, 4 plus hours every day is gonna do to a generation. And so that's definitely a big thing that we have to consider. Another thing is, like, for example, the cost of living has gone up dramatically, and, the whole owning a house with a white picket fence and, like, getting a job that can afford that, is not as much of a reality anymore as it was, for previous generations. And so I think that burden amongst my generation having to look forward and see, wow, like, A, my job options are really limited. B, I really have to perform well early on in order to get that. And C, have to deal with this whole other social world that we've never seen before. I think those are just a few of the issues that my generation has that hasn't been addressed as well. And thankfully, there's a lot of lawmakers, there's a lot of legislators who are really taking it upon themselves to focus on the younger generation and focus on education. Like, for example, New Mexico, we rank last in education every single year, and we're going to continue to see the effects of that for years to come. There's clear correlators between education and income and poverty, and until we start really prioritizing that, we're not going to see a difference in the future, right? So that's kind of like a long-winded answer, and there's a lot of things
Yeah.
in there, but that's kind of just a few of the things that I've seen.
There's a no wonder Sophia really likes you. Sophia is my youngest daughter, and she's always talking about, I wish adults would listen to us more. Wish we had a bigger voice. But you are that voice now. You're now in a position by being in the position that you've been in, and in Senator Heinrich's office, and being a representative of your generation to the people who are actually making policy decisions. I'm sure you were probably asked a lot of times, what do you think? What was the what do you think was the most significant conversation you had where you felt like your opinion mattered when you were in Washington over the
Mhm.
summer?
Yeah. I mean, I'll start by saying, as a young person, like, interning, you will typically not get the experience of being heard. And that is not, like, just on a federal level or on the state or city level, like, just in general. As an intern, you normally are supposed to be doing, like, more administrative work and helping out around the office, which is really important, right? Those are good skills to have. Um, I think I'll start by saying when I was at the mayor's office, I was really young. I was like 15, 16 years old. And even looking back, like, I don't think I had a full understanding of how the world worked and how policy worked and how to really make change in the same way as I would now, right? But because I was really ambitious and I was very curious, I think I wasn't afraid to, like, raise my hand in, like, a meeting of policymakers and say, like, "Hey, why don't we do this?" Like, obviously, there's reasons why, but I was really curious and I wanted to know. And so, I think at the beginning when I was younger, I obviously was not my voice was not being heard, and maybe that was a good thing. Um, but over the years, I think once you really push and you really fight for that, you can definitely elevate your voice to a different level. So when I was at the senator's office, again, I was really trying to help out administratively, right? Like, we have to answer phones, and that is such a helpful thing. You get to really listen to constituents and see, like, what are the issues that are impacting them back home in New Mexico, right? Um, I, had to batch emails and do a lot of correspondence and stuff, and that's more busy work, but it's really important. But at the same time, we had a few different bills and a few different things that were floating around related to housing and to welfare, and I was super interested in it and got to write my own RECA, which is kind of like a recommendation letter to the senator to say, like, we want you to co-sponsor this bill, or we want you to introduce this on the floor. Um, and so got to write 2 of those and, like, finally felt like I had my position on that level. And, we don't really know what's gonna happen, like, in the future, and we don't really know if he's gonna, like, necessarily have the bandwidth to push those forward, but one of them did get approved, so that was really cool to see. Um, but yeah, I think, as a young person in general, like my biggest advice that I've always give to other young people is like, you're not going to be heard for so long. But the more you stay curious and the more you keep pushing to have your voice heard is like the better chances you'll get, right? Um, and that was, definitely a big learning lesson for me.
No, that's fantastic. And so are you saying that one of the pieces that you wrote actually uh got became a law or got approved? Tell me about that.
So the legislative process is very, very long, right?
Yeah.
Um, it can take like 3 to 5 years for some bills to get passed. For example, Senator Heinrich's halt fentanyl bill, it just got passed uh, while I was in DC, so probably like a month or two ago. And that entire process took about 3 to 5 years to get
Wow.
passed. Um, and even then, once it get passed, it faces barriers, right? Like you have to implement this, right? But the first step of it, right, is our legislative aides in the office. They do a ton of research into their specific issue areas. And they say, okay, here are other bills that have been introduced on either the House side or the Senate side that have maybe fallen through, that should be reintroduced. This is a bill that could really help New Mexicans specifically. And so I was just kind of doing a ton of research and with one of our legislative aides, and we were looking into he was housing issue area was his issue area. And he was kind of looking into a few different things. One of them is like a home ownership. I'm not really sure how much I can talk about this, but one of them was like a first time like home ownership bill, and then another
Right.
one was on expanding service coordinators. So I got to do a ton of the research that went behind it, find a lot of the numbers, and then the recommendation is pretty short, but it looks like Senator Heinrich is trying to introduce that home ownership bill. So it'll get introduced on the floor, and then it has a very long journey to
Sure.
becoming law. And, there's good chances it might fail along the way, but it's a start, right? So,
Right. I want to talk some more about one of your passions, which is mental health. And you just brought up a couple of things. So there's a couple of ways that I want to go. So I want to go into mental health, but before we do that, I do want to share with the audience because a lot of our audience has been through the YOS process. We have a lot of coaches that are going to be listening, and they're going to want to know, okay, what's Anya's YOS? So let's go over that real quick because it comes out in your answers. I'm kind of hearing it a little bit. So Anya's why is to do things the right way. So she's a right way person. So you're a systems and processes person. You're good at organizing. You're good at follow through. And I can obviously see that you're very disciplined. You've been able to accomplish a lot of things where that require structure and process, following processes and systems. How do you see that? Let's talk about your why first. How do you see that impacting the path that you've taken?
Yeah. Well, one thing I will say is I've always been a really big fan of like these, personality type of things. Like I was a big fan of the Myers-Briggs test, and I
Right.
felt like it was really helpful for me to understand like a, what are my strengths, but also what are my weaknesses and what can I work on, right? And so the YOS for me was really impactful because it's way more specific than, for
Mhm.
example, Myers-Briggs. Like Myers-Briggs is great and I love it and I still like try to do it every year.
Right.
But the YOS can really tell you like, and I think maybe it's just because this is a really formative year for me in general, personality wise, and in what I want to do in the future. I think the
Right.
YOS really helped me understand like what are my strengths and also like where can that present a shortfall.
Right.
And so, for example, the idea of like the right way and makes sense, I think alludes to the idea that I will recognize issues and I'll see that maybe there's some work being done on it, but it's not being as impactful as it can be. And so I
Right.
think one of my passions has always been like trying to find issues and try to find like what is the best way to go about this
Hmm.
to help people, right? Um, and so I would say that that has been definitely very informative for me. But also, like, even talking about some of my weaknesses, I think in being very persistent about, like, that organized routine way, um, I would say sometimes I can be, like, a little bit difficult to work with in the sense that, like, I need everything to be organized, and I think going to
Right.
college and becoming independent, like, I really like things to go my way, and, so that's something I'm working on, but, yeah, I think the YOS is definitely very helpful in understanding, like, where you can even go in the future with it too, so
Yeah. You bring up a great point because you brought up the challenges, right? So the strength of being a right
mhm.
way person is you're so organized and you like things to be in their place. The challenge can be is you may not be as flexible as other people would like you to be. So you're gonna
Yeah.
stick to your routine and do things, and that's so very helpful, right? So, and I think understanding the strengths of it and understanding the challenges too. You mentioned your how makes sense. So you're a problem solver. You're always the way you find you get to do things the right way is by making sense of things, solving complex issues. And as we've gone through this interview, we've seen ways that you have found problems and you said, okay, how do we solve that, and create a system and a process to solve that problem. And then your what is better way. And you mentioned that too. There's got to be a better way, right? So you often probably ask
Mhm.
yourself, there's got to be a better way to solve this problem, and then let's create a process so that it can be solvable not just today but in the future, and creating a formula or a system so that it doesn't fall by the wayside, as a lot of things do, right? There's a lot of quick fixes that can happen. And I think that's where the real talent and the skill that you bring on you is not only are you going to solve the problem, but you're going to create a system and a process so that that problem doesn't happen again. And it's going to be better than what we're doing. You're always looking for a better way. And I see that, like I said, in just the few things that you've talked about, I can kind of see that pattern of you saying, okay, there's a problem to solve. How do we solve it? What's a better way to do it? And then once you find that better way, let's create a system and a process that will last a long time. You mentioned the Echo project, which I've been familiar with for many, many years. How did you mentioned using the Echo model to expand your mental well-being program that you created at your own school to other schools. Tell us a little bit about that. For those that aren't familiar with the Echo Project, how did you take, and that's a better way thing, you took something from one area and you applied it to another. So tell us a little bit about how that came about.
Yeah, and I think just, like, going back to the YOS, like, I had recognized this problem in my community, right? Mental health and people struggling with their well-being. And part of that too is like balancing this academic side, this social side, and then the factors of COVID being online for so long, like maybe not being as in touch with your friends and social media. And there's like so many things, right? And so I had recognized this issue and we had tried out this maybe potential solution at my own school, and saw some really positive effects about it, right? Obviously, there's no one way to solve student well-being because it is such a personal issue and mental health, right? It's
Right.
such an individualized thing, and there's only so much that a school can do, right? But we recognized this one solution that was helping people, and so then the challenge was how do we scale this, right? Like how can I share this with other people who and other schools who might want it? Um, I was pretty familiar with Project Echo. They're a nonprofit for the people who don't know, they're a nonprofit, started in Albuquerque, but now, like, very global and started in telehealth. It was basically you could, and maybe I'm not explaining this very well because 'cause I'm not an expert in medicine, but basically, there's a lot of rural areas in New Mexico, and, a lot of people were having to drive all the way up to Albuquerque or other cities in order to get treatment. And so the idea was that if you could take an online model and train healthcare providers in these rural areas, they can get their treatment in their own cities, own towns, own areas, right? And so they won't have to travel as far, and that can be a big barrier for a lot of people. And so the idea was similar, right? We wanted to take student leaders at schools and do this like online model with them, um, and have them kind of take the same student well-being advisory and go to their own schools and implement it there. And so it kind of creates this ripple effect or like this web where, now I've started at my school, but there's 10 other schools that are doing the same thing and we can collaborate. I was learning a lot about what I should implement at my own school just based on the ideas of other people and other younger people like myself, right? Um, and so we did that. We even like created an app at one point where the students were able to like journal and log their emotions and write affirmations and do all of these things. Um, and so yeah, that was definitely really big for me because I recognized that one of my strengths was like organizing and being able to organize systems in my head, um, to where, like, when I recognized that we should scale this, I was like, "Okay, Echo has this model that could really be compatible with this," and, yeah, we just kinda went from there.
Yeah, I know. You did it. By the way, you did a great job of explaining the Echo model. That's exactly how I would describe it. I've known about this for a long time. Sanjeev
Mhm.
Arora, who created the Echo project, for him, when he did it, it was such a new thing, telehealth and talking to, seeing patients or seeing care providers or care providers talking to each other via the same platform that we're using online, was very innovative. For you, it's kind of second nature for your generation. You've
Yeah.
lived on Zoom, you've done FaceTime calls. How old were you when the iPhone came out? I'm trying to remember, in 2007. So that
Oh
was
my gosh.
uh,
I was born in
11 years.
2006, so
Right. So your entire life, the iPhone has been around. That was such a big
yeah.
transition generationally for so the kids probably one generation above you. They were in their teens or maybe they're 7 to 8 years old when the iPhone came out, and they went from having the internet and social media on their computer to having it in their pocket. 24/7. So there's obvious advantages, right? It's really cool to be able to film something and capture it, and then even broadcast it live. But there's some disadvantages, right? We get some
Yeah.
disconnectedness, right? I know for you, and knowing you personally, knowing your brother, so I know you guys are well adjusted. I mean, I see you in social situations with other adults, and you're able to carry on a conversation. You're able to talk to somebody, look them in the eye, and believe it or not, that's a rare skill in today's day and age, and we see it less and less in the younger generation. Um, I even see people at lunch texting each other, sitting across from each other, or sharing stuff on social media. And I'm sure you've probably been part of some of that. What's
Mhm.
something we don't understand about how that's happening, and what benefit do you see of being such a well-rounded individual who is able to not only you can conduct a conversation like we're doing via digital media, but also being able to do that personally. How can we help, or
Mm.
what can students do to be better at that in-person one-on-one interaction?
Yeah. Um, I'm gonna fully admit I actually have not been great recently with my phone, and that's something I'm trying to work on. There's this amazing app called Opal, and this is like shameless plug, but they kind of like really restrict your screen time, and I've been using that a lot recently, which has helped. And they kind of have like a leaderboard you can do with your friends, so I can see my friend's screen time, and I can say, "Hey, like, what were you doing today? You were on your phone for 5 hours." Um,
Wow.
but I think more than that, like, yeah, I my relationship with my phone is really interesting. I think on one hand, yes, social media can be pretty distracting. It can really take away from your interactions with people in person. Um, but on the other hand, especially going to Stanford, such a tech-oriented school, I really have started to see the benefits of technology, come to life, even in social settings. So, an example of that, my roommate, she's amazing, love her to death, and we're rooming again this year. So, she's from Austin, Texas, and her school was completely AI based. So, in the mornings, they would do 2 hours of AI app learning, which was completely personalized and allow them to do their schooling at whatever level, at whatever pace they were at. instead of being restricted to like a classroom. And then in the afternoons, they would work on developing a passion project. So her passion project is this huge education newsletter that she does every week that has over 20,000 subscribers. Her sister, for example, has this like teen dating app, and it uses AI. And so I think on one hand, there is this idea that socially, I think my generation has been maybe stunted a little bit or, has this big distracting factor that can take away from their in-person conversations. But at the same time, there are a lot of really cool applications of AI and applications of digitalization that we can start to use to our benefit. And I was just talking about how New Mexico, we rank consistently last in education every year. But something like personalizing education on that level and using, the tools that we've been given, instead of just getting the short end of the stick every time with it, like, why aren't we using this to our advantage? Um, so, I mean, I say this, I do still think there's a lot of research that needs to be done, right? Like, we don't know what the effects of these screens are gonna be, like, we haven't had them for very long. Also, like, environmental concerns, right? Like, AI uses so much water, and so we don't know if that's sustainable in the future as well. But I think it's a start to maybe instead of focus so much on some of those negatives, like, yes, turn the direction towards that, but also maybe look at, like, what are some of the things that we can get that's positive out of this too. But yeah.
Yeah, I like the idea that you brought up about personalization for of education. Obviously, there's some. I can't imagine your Fred's school. It sounds amazing where you could everybody
Mhm.
could go at their own pace and kind of get into what was their areas of interest and probably really excel there. Um,
Yeah.
you brought something up that Sophia brings up all the time. What are some of the rules that your generation has? Like Sophia says, I'm very good at
Mm.
just picking up the phone and calling somebody. And she's like, Dad, you can't just call somebody. You only call them if it's like an absolute emergency. If you call somebody, they're going to think you're dying. You're supposed to text ahead of time. What are some of those tech rules that my generation doesn't know that are existent? Is that a real rule? Like, if somebody just calls you out of the blue, is that like crazy?
I think this is one of those things where like Sophia's generation might even be different from mine. And I'm not
Yeah.
even saying like might be like I think it is. Um, there's so many trends that apply to my generation that doesn't apply to people who are literally like 3 years older or 3 years younger, right?
Right.
Um,
Yeah. So tell us
for
about some of
me,
those.
yeah, like, for me personally, like, the phone example, like, I hate texting, I'm so bad at texting, I cannot respond to people, it's, like, terrible.
Right.
So I love calling people because, I mean, you can tell I'm, like, a talker forever,
Right.
but I love that, I FaceTime my friends every night, like, that's a big thing for me. Um, I think, there's some, like, texting things in high school that people would always talk about and, like, I used to take, pretty seriously, like, you text people in certain situations and, like, this is weird to say, but I think maybe this is, like, another generational thing, like, once I got to college, I feel like, I don't really care too much about, like, the mode of communicating with people, as long as it gets the message across in the right way. Um, like, I think my texting style and my communication style is kind of weird, and other people might find it weird, but it works for me. Like, I use emojis and, like, I, have a certain way I text, but I I've just gotten to the age where it's like, I don't really care. I've, like, gotten my message across, and that's what matters to me. And so, yeah, I would say other, like, unspoken rules, um, like opening messages and, like, leaving people on read, I think is kind of like a big no-no in my generation, but yeah, I mean, I'm pretty bad at texting, so that's, like, something I struggle with anyways. Um, there's a lot of things on, like, social media now because and this is something that's kinda scary, like, Instagram notifies people if you, like if you're active and, like, if you send them or, like, you take a
Yeah.
screenshot of, like, a picture they send, like, those are things that I think my generation's a little bit more conscious of, which is kind of scary to think about.
That is scary. Yeah. I'm not very much on social media. I love that you take phone calls, Anya. So that, you know what, if you ever just want to talk, give me a call. I pick up the phone.
Yes.
That's the other thing. A lot of people don't pick up the phone, right? They literally will
Mhm.
look at your name and say, "Oh, let me see if they leave a message," and then
Yes.
or they'll
Yeah.
say their voicemail literally says, "If you want to get a hold of me, text me. Don't leave a voicemail
Yeah.
because I there are so many people that don't so like ever listen to their voicemails." So that would be the equivalent for you of unread messages, right? So you
Yeah.
you you got to get through your messages. You have a system that you follow, and so my inbox would probably make you nervous. I have 4,728 unread messages,
Oh
and
no,
a lot
it's
of it is
mine's
spam. So
worse.
what I do is I just get rid of them. I just have to go through a
Mhm.
purge. But no, that's very interesting, and it's interesting how it changes generation to generation. So I
Yeah.
know we've been talking for a while. It's been so fun that I'm like losing track of time. I want to make sure we get into what are some of your goals, Anya? As I can see that you're passionate about mental health and public policy. If we were to look, if you have your ideal next 5 years, what are you doing in 5 years?
Um, I will say I think the mental health issue is still a really big deal, right? Especially New Mexico. Um, I will say now I haven't really been as focused on that issue area because one of the things that I have been interested now, I think, is more I've been really interested in housing and welfare. And so I've kind of like taken a step away from mental health. But I think in general, my goals is like Stanford is very academically grueling, and um, I think I've had to take a lot of time away from my passions in order to focus on just getting like a good grade in a class. Um, but even more than that, like my biggest goal is to like always be trying to create something, like always be trying to apply yourself. Whether it's like a stupid like app idea or something like a club you want to create or a program, and so I think that like mindset has always helped me kind of embrace my creative side, but also explore things that I want to do in the future. So right now I would say my goal for the next 4 years, like I have this one project I'm working on with my friend that I really want to develop like by the end of this year. um, I think academically, like, I really wanna try and maintain a good GPA and just take classes I'm interested in, not really be as concerned about, like, padding my GPA with classes I'm not interested in, but just doing good in things that I am interested in. Um, and then, I think for the long term, and this literally changes every month, so I'm probably gonna watch this in October and be like, "What was she talking about?" Um, but I think what I wanna do is finish up my bachelor's and my master's in 4 years, and then go work either in DC or as a staffer or in New Mexico in an office here, and then maybe go to law school one day if I can, afford it by then, like, do that, um, and then, yeah, just I wanna do something, I don't really care, like, what level it's on. I don't care if it's in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I don't care if it's in DC. I just wanna be in the position where I can have the most impact, um, and I think it's gonna take me a while to figure out what that is, but,
Right.
hopefully it comes around.
Well, there's no doubt you've already made an impact with everything you've already done, Anya. And I know you're probably thinking to yourself, "Well, I've interned and done some things." Um, but you're well, and maybe your passion project. We can maybe have you on again and talk about it when you and your friend get ready to launch it. But what's so when we talk about young leaders, we talk about that development. What's the biggest lesson you've learned that you think is going to help you in your endeavors in with everything you've done and being involved in the mayor's office and Senator Heinrich's office? What do you think is the biggest learning?
Yeah, I really like this piece of advice because I think it speaks to my why like operating system as well, really well. I think maybe that's why I resonated with it a lot. Um, our chief of staff at the senator's office, she is amazing. She's a powerhouse. And she told me over the summer this one thing, which is that when she looks at specific issue areas, she does so much research and she keeps breaking down that issue until she finds like one small tangible solution that can have a good impact. And so I took that away and I hold that with myself now a lot, when I'm exploring different areas, when I'm looking, I in my free time, like, I try to read CRS reports and try to understand other issues really well, and, I think that idea of really breaking something down to its smallest piece, really understanding an issue fully, and then, finding one small impactful area that you can fix, that can have a big impact. I think that's a piece of advice that I would give to anyone who is trying to explore policy or even explore like change making. If I had gone back and told myself when I was in 10th grade, like, you're interested in fixing this mental health crisis, like, it seems like a really big thing. But there's so many small things that we can do to fix it that just take a little bit of research. And so, yeah, I think that speaks to me a lot because again, it goes back to my like really wanting to find the right solution type of mindset. But yeah, I would give that advice to other people as well.
I love that you bring that up because I think it's important. I think the key point that I'm taking away from that is you got to take action, right? And
Yes.
sometimes taking action involves researching, and that's the action that you take. And you do that research, and then as your mentor, what's her name, by the way? Let's give her a shout out.
Her name's Rebecca Avisha. She like I don't even know if she remembers me now, but
Rebecca Visha, and she's the chief of staff for Senator Martin Heinrich, right?
yes,
That's
yeah.
really valuable advice. So she said, go research the issue and then find the one little thing you can do. Because again, you can't change the world in one
Mhm.
fell swoop, but you can take small actions and little things. And I love the idea of researching and finding the one small thing that can make the biggest impact. Gary Sanchez, who founded the Y Institute, he always said, it's always great to look for the small thing that can make the biggest impact, because one small action that can make a big impact, it's so much fun, it's so rewarding, and then it feeds that dopamine, right? Oh, we got something done with a small action that made a big impact, and then you move on to the next small action, the next small action. So I can see where that leads to taking action. Go ahead, you were going to say something.
Oh, no, yeah, I just totally agree with you. I think, like, it's kind of a ripple effect again, right?
Yeah.
So
That's fantastic. Well, you've done a great job. Thank you so much for being on the
yes.
show, Anya. I have really enjoyed asking questions, and I definitely want to have you back on as you continue on your journey. I know we probably ought to have your dad and Neil on, and we'll just have a whole Parasher section of the podcast just for you guys. But that's really great advice that you gave us. I've enjoyed learning and hearing more about the things that you're involved in and the things that you see in the future, talking about generational differences. You've given us a lot to think about. So thank you for being on. What do you say we end the show on that note, Anya?
Why not? Why not? Thank you so much.
Thank you for being on, Anya. We are looking forward to keeping track of you and seeing what you do. I know this. You're going to make a big difference in the world, and I can't wait to see how that manifests itself as you continue on your journey. Thank you for being on, guys. If you're listening to the Lead Different podcast for the first time, make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you comment and tell us what you thought about this interview. Let Anya know. We got to get in the name of that app, Anya. If you will email it to me, we'll make sure include it in the show notes. The app that you talked about for keeping track of screen time. I think that's really fun. We'll make sure and do that. And guys, that'll be in the show notes. So hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Don't forget to tell us what you think of the show, and we'll see you next week on the Lead Different podcast. Thank you.
This is Lead Different.
Subscribe now. Discover a new era of leadership. Lead different because great leaders change the world.